Another day, another faction, and another faction that I think have made out really well with the FAQ changes and the match play guide specifically. Beastmen have basically not been affected negatively by most, if not all, of the changes, and with the match play guide really rewarding big bricks of scoring infantry, I think Beastmen are in a very solid spot going forwards into 1.5. This video is brought to you by the TSN Arena, the #1 place to go for Old World and Age of Sigmar tournaments here in Nottingham. Rob runs a wide range of events, from 500 point forays all the way up to 2,600 point mega battles, where single models like dragons have a less pronounced effect on the game and you see bigger bricks of infantry. Of course, there's still the normal 2,000 point battles, but even in there's some room for experimentation, with fan favourite events like the river battles going incredibly quickly. The TSN Arena is located on the outskirts of Nottingham City Centre near the Motorpoint Arena, and it is conveniently located in the middle of plenty of parking spots within walking distance of multiple hotels and two great places to go for food, including Snenton Market, which has a wide range of options. So, if you're interested in going to a venue where there's plenty of table space, the comfiest chairs that I've been in at any venue, and free drinks all weekend, go to www.tsnarena.com to buy your tickets today. Link in the description. As always, let's start off by looking at the specific changes in the PDF for Beastmen, and there's really only one here in terms of the main books, which is Dragon Ogres go up to 59 points. This is a little bit of a nerf, they're still very good. I think they could have been slapped with much more of a change there, but to be frank, I think while the Dragon Ogres are still good, I'm a lot less excited to run them because they can't score. They're not in core, so despite being very efficient units, they don't actually play the mission in a way that I am interested in doing with Beastmen. I still think they're good, and maybe you put them in because I think they churn through undead quite well if you take bigger units of them, but I'm expecting to see the single Shartax maybe take a bit of a backseat compared to where they were before. Moving down, we've got the errata here for the Beastmen Brayherd's Arcane Journal, and this is where things are quite nice. So first of all, Strangleroot goes down from 9 to 8. That's a magic missile, just making it slightly easier to cast. It's a line magic missile, it's fine. Banner of the Warped Moon, this change is in line with Bretonnians, so we saw yesterday Falconhorn has gone to once per game, Banner of the Warped Moon has also gone to once per game. You still have to roll the leadership test, which makes it even less appealing than the Falconhorn, because the only way to get Veteran into your unit, is to put it on a unit of the Bestigor, which were, I guess, you're not taking the unit 5 Bestigor holding the Banner of the Warped Moon, whose only job was to be 120 odd points, stand by a Herdstone, and use the banner. That's no longer a thing, but maybe you run them just as a unit of Bestigor in core now. I think that is more appealing. We'll see. I think I'm more interested in Gore or other units, but potentially still there if you wanted to use it as a one-turn, try and catch the Bretonnian player, something like that. The big change here, Dark Coven. So, the first sentence just says, you can do this thing. The second, third, fourth sentences are replaced with, instead of miscasting, basically, the old system was you could leech power from the other casters around you, which was you'd get +1 for each caster in your command range. But downside was you miscast on any double, not just double one. That was huge. Like, I think you need to have at least 2 casters in range of you to get any sort of efficiency bonus because of the increased risk of miscast. I didn't like that version. This version's really good. So now, this is anytime a Bray Shaman or Great Bray Shaman makes a casting or dispel roll, they may apply a +1 modifier to the roll if one or more friendly wizards that are not fleeing or stupid within command range. However, if they roll a double 1, they miscast, but also the miscast applies to all of the wizards in range of the, the wizard that's doing the spell. So much less punishing. You've gone from a 1 in 6 chance to have a miscast on everyone to a 1 in 36 chance to have a miscast. Much better there. It is capped at only a +1 modifier, but you only need a single wizard to get the benefit of it. So now having 2 wizards just getting +1 to their casts, really, really nice. I do like this. Obviously, not being able to flee or not fleeing or succumbing to stupidity just makes sense in terms of how they've tweaked the magic rules. And remember, this is specifically for the wild, primal coven, wild coven, the non-minotaur Army of Infamy, whose name has completely gone out of my mind. But anyway, so this means that you can get really consistent spellcasting buffs, and we'll talk about that more when we go to the casting changes, but this put Beastmen probably at the #1 most consistent casting army in the game if you're going down this route. So with the specific changes looked at, what are the other changes to Beastmen that might not be in the specific rules for Beastmen's the PDF? Chaos Trolls. These are in the Warriors of Chaos book, but you can use them in Beastmen. They're vaguely worth mentioning. You're probably not going to take them, but they now have Motley Crew, so they can use a variety of weapons. Again, I've said this multiple times. I don't really care about this from a balance perspective. It's just nice for people who've got collections of, a mix of models with two-hand weapons and great weapons. So nice to have there. Not everything has to be a competitive change. Then we've got the nerfs, and this list isn't very long, so if we start off with the Banner of the Warped Moon, we've talked about this already, it only was around for about 2 months. My expectation was that it was going to get nerfed because it felt like Falconhorn was going to get nerfed as well, so I wasn't ever really thinking about building around this, and I think a lot of people are in the same sort of mind, but it is something that, previously you could shut down flying models quite consistently, and now you can once per game shut down flying models, which is fine, but probably not worth the points in my opinion. So I'd say Banner of the Warped Moon, that's the big nerf to Beastmen. Minor point changes, like I mentioned. Dragon Ogre's got minor point changes. I'm not super worried about that. That's not the reason that I'm less likely to play them. They're still very good for the points there, so not a big nerf to Beastmen on that one. Next up, we've got Frenzy, and this is, in my opinion, a bit of a nerf to Beastmen. So previously, the way that Frenzy worked was you just had +1 to your attacks if you were frenzied, and that was just a flat buff that you got, didn't have to think about it. If you lost combat, you lost the +1 attack, were no longer frenzied. Obviously, it comes with immune psychology and you have to charge. Those bits still exist, but you only get the +1 attack now if you have charged or made a follow-up move. So significantly less output if you're getting charged, which if you're stacking that with a unit of, infantry that is frenzied for some reason and they get charged, they're fighting in 2 ranks, so it kind of comes out in the wash. But Minotaurs especially really liked having frenzy before. Yes, they're fast for infantry, but they're not that fast. They're still not going to be charging most of the time. They're going to be getting charged by, for example, a dragon or whatever. I think this is one of the real downsides to Beastmen now, that if you use your Blood Rage and you get Frenzy, you only get the downside of the Frenzy in that you have to overrun if you win combat, but you don't get the +1 attack because you didn't make the charge roll. So, bit of a nerf there for Beastmen. Also, we've got maximum armor value, and I'm vaguely mentioning this as a nerf. It's not really a nerf for Beastmen, but there is one specific case where this does come up, which is the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. And this previously, it's a T5 monster. It can buy magical equipment. You could buy full plate on it and get it up to a 2-up armor save. Now you can't do that, or, well, you can, but it's capped at a 3-up armor save, which is a shame. You can still run it with a 3-up armor save and a 5-up ward save, but that is worse than it was before, and I'm less interested in playing it. I will say, in terms of the sort of push-pull of buff and nerf, you don't have to worry about the large target shooting and poison shooting, so the things that were really worrying at range are no longer as much of an issue. So maybe it's not too bad, but something to remember if you're looking to put a Shaggoth in your list. Finally on the nerfs, we've got poison shooting. Now, Beastmen could do the teleporting poison shooting brick. They were the worst army at doing it, but they could do it, and it had become part of the sort of normal tournament strategy, and that has gone away. But I don't think that's the end of the world, because you're not doing anywhere near, or you don't need the poison shooting as much. Infantry's better. You can deal with the large targets in different ways, and you've got plenty of output. So I'm not really upset that poison shooting is gone, but it is a nerf to the sort of old Beastman game plan, where you're potentially teleporting around 50 or so Ungor with a BSB in there with the vitriolic totem giving them poison. So, bit of a nerf there, but also, like I mentioned, it was the worst version of it. It was the hardest to set up. You only had short bows. You had to put a BSB in there. So, I'm pretty glad to be spending points on other things that are more efficient. On to buffs, and I think Beastmen have got a lot of buffs, so let's break them down as we go through. First of all, Dead or Fled, 25% of wounds. This is a big buff because I think it's very easy for Beastmen players to get enemy dragons down to just a couple of wounds before they run away. It's not always super easy to kill them, but there's a lot of things that can threaten to do a good chunk of damage to dragons. I'm talking about, really offensively loaded out Doom Bulls, the Minotaur characters, or Viletide casters, those bits and pieces, or even just, a big unit of Dragon Ogres without a unit champion that hit in and do a surprising amount of wounds. There's a lot of things in there that can chip away wounds on a dragon very comfortably, but might struggle to do just quite enough to get them over the line. So now if the dragon is below 25% of their wounds, they are going to give up some points, which is nice, and Beastmen don't have this issue because they don't have any units that are affected by this, so they're not going to be giving up points in a way that they weren't before. Max points cap, again, not directly affecting Beastmen, but it affects the things against them. So the dragons that you're playing against, less likely to have triple saves, less likely to have stuff like the Opal Amulet, less likely to have the Strikes Last aura, or it will not have the Strikes Last aura because Chaos can't do that anymore on the dragons. So there's lots of changes in there that just make the things that were, quite difficult for Beastmen to play against now less difficult to play against. So good stuff there on the points caps. Maximum armor value. Again, mentioned this on the nerfs. This is mostly a buff. Again, you're not playing against dragons with a 2-up armor save anymore. This is nice. It barely affects any of your units. All of your stuff's infantry or cavalry. Well, basically infantry. So if they could get to a 2-up save, they can still get to a 2-up save. Magic, standards, and characters. I mentioned this with Bretonnians, I'm going to mention it again, and that's because I think Beastmen have some pretty solid banners, and you're probably going to be running characters or multiple characters in big bricks of Beastmen units, which is something that's, where having the clarification that magic standards do apply to characters is really nice. Again, pretty much everyone was playing it this way before, so it's not really a buff, but it's nice to have that clarified. Remember, if you've got a magic standard on your BSB or your unit champion, all of those effects also affect the characters in the unit. Casting changes. You might think, as an army that has leaned pretty heavily on its magic over the time, that the casting changes would be a nerf. I would disagree. I think they're a pretty big buff, and the main reason for that is everyone else's magic got a lot worse. Your magic got a little bit worse, but then also you got more consistency built in. The Herdstone, or potentially, the Dark Cabal, where you can get additional bonuses to cast. So Beastmen looking like they've got really good casting in the new edition. Still looking to be putting a Viletide caster into most of my lists, I think, when I'm writing them, or even just going multiple casters. Plenty of stuff there. They've got a great signature spell as well, which is really worth mentioning if we go down to... I don't even know if I mentioned it there. All right. Viletide, such an incredible damage spell. Obviously, it's really good if you've got it with Hagtree Fetish, and it's kind of very swingy otherwise, but it casts on an 8, and a magic missile that casts on an 8 now is very solid. And if you're using something like Dark Covenant and Herdstone, your level 1 casters are casting that with +3 to cast, which is better than most armies' level 4 casters. So pretty good stuff there for Beastmen in terms of their casting. Again, just to mention the Herdstone, you're probably putting one of these into every army before the changes. Now you're definitely putting it into every army. It gives you so many buffs. It gives an aura of +1 to cast and -1 to cast for enemy units. It gives magic resist. It gives so many things. It's such a great piece. I would definitely recommend putting one of these into your army, no matter which version of Beastmen you're playing. Also, Pillar of Fire nerf and Vortex spells being nerfed in that you can dispel them from the range of the Vortex instead of the range of the Wizard, or both. This is fantastic. You weren't really using that many Vortex spells as a Beastman player. There was the occasional one that came up, but you weren't using Pillar of Fire because you don't have battle magic. You weren't using Column of Crystal. You don't have Illusion. So this is really nice. Makes it a lot easier for Beastman players to get rid of enemy Vortexes, and they weren't leaning on the Vortex spells themselves. Again, previously mentioned Dark Coven. Great stuff. Also, infantry changes. Almost the entire army is infantry. So super happy to have all of the buffs that come in with infantry, which we're going to talk about as a whole section here. So, speaking of the infantry changes, as always, there are 3 big ones that we want to look at, and that is Press a Battle, Massed Infantry, Parry. How do these affect Beastmen? Well, they affect them to some level, I would say. They like the changes, but they're not huge. So, first of all, Press a Battle, this is probably the best one. It gives you a second rank, a second fighting rank for infantry, and I'm talking regular and heavy infantry. Doesn't apply monstrous infantry, but you get to make attacks with 2 ranks as long as you haven't charged or pursuit. So, if your opponent has made a fallback in good order and you catch them, you don't get to make a second attack. So you get more attacks. It's harder for your opponent to wipe your front rank. You're more likely to actually be swinging back. This is nice. Massed Infantry, really like this for Beastmen. They have huge units. This gives you +1 to your combat resolution as long as you are an infantry unit, again, regular or heavy infantry. But on top of that, if you are outnumbering the opponent in terms of unit strength. So if you've got 30 infantry and they have 16 cavalry, and cavalry are unit strength 2, they outnumber you, doesn't count. But if you've got 30 infantry and they have a dragon, you're definitely getting that +1. So more combat res, very easy to access. Finally, we've got parry, and Beastmen don't really lean on their armor save, but this gives them a slight armor save that you can have as an option. So when you've got a sword and shield specifically, or hand weapon and shield, you get +1 to your armor save in combat up to a maximum of 3 up. So that means that you can have Gauze with a 5 up armor save, or Ungor with a 5 up armor save. Is it huge? No. Is it nice to have? Yeah, sure. It'll save you some a couple of models here and there. Actually makes using the hand weapon shield a worthwhile consideration in combat, especially when you're putting it on the Gore, who do have that toughness 4 already, so a pretty beefy unit for a very small points cost. Additionally, there are changes to weapon selection, and again, this isn't huge for Beastmen, but they don't mind it for stuff like Minotaurs potentially, or regular Ungor, who've got hand weapon shield and also some version of spear, depending on which one you take. The way this works is, instead of sticking one weapon at the start of combat and sticking with it, now you pick one weapon at the start of each 1.1 combat phase, where you select the unit and you go, okay, this is my unit I'm fighting with, this turn I'm going to use hand weapon shield or spears, get that extra rank of fighting, whatever works for you. So nice to have, even though not all of your units are going to make huge amounts of use out of it. And then something to point out here, I know I've said already it's regular and heavy infantry only for the previous 3 rules, but monstrous infantry do not benefit from it. So I would say these rules give a slight buff to the regular and heavy infantry and a slight nerf to the monstrous infantry, but then when you stack it on top of the actual scoring changes for the mission pack, that's where I go, actually, the regular infantry and maybe the heavy infantry for Beastmen look really solid. And even the monstrous infantry don't look too bad. Like, being able to take big, beefy units that you can put other buffs on top of is not a bad strategy if you're looking to stand on an objective and make it very unappealing for opponents to charge into you. We should also talk more specifically about the casting changes for Beastmen. So if we're looking at casting changes, obviously every army is only able to take 1 level 4 or 2 level 3s if they're using the restrictions in the match play guidebook. However, this does not apply specifically to named characters. So Kralmor is a level 4 wizard, making you one of the few armies in the game that can have 2 level 4 wizards. Are you going to do this? Maybe, actually. Beastmen don't have a spell familiar, so you don't have easy use of picking, the spells that you want, and their signature spells are really, really good. So maybe you don't bother going for lore familiar with this army, even though it is very good. I think it depends what you want to do, and we'll talk about it more when we talk about the actual lores overall. But if you want to have 2 level 4 wizards, Kralmor gets around that restriction nicely. We've got great signature spells. I'm not even going to talk about the other 2. I do like Mantle of Gorok for having just a hilarious beta, melee character that's also a wizard. But if we're talking about the good one, we're talking about Vile Tide. Vile Tide gives you 5d6 strength 1 hits that ignore armor saves. So this is the sort of thing that you would take to kill dragons, because you're going to combine it with Hag Tree Fetish. If you're a Beastman player, you know it, you love it, you take it every game. Gives you rerolls on all of your magic missile wounds, which you'll go into a lore with a magic missile, potentially elementalism, try and get a second magic missile, and then just light up anything that comes into your path. This is your answer for things that you struggle to deal with. Pegasus Knights, dragons, anything fast, basically, that has a low number of wounds, per point. So, really good signature spells. Looking at you, Vile Tide, we're going to be using that as much as possible, and it only casts on an 8. Really nice. Again, as mentioned, you can take this on level 1 casters pretty comfortably. You're not upset that you're going to be rolling a 7, or if you've got a Herdstone, a 6, or if you're, in the Primal Herd, you've got the Dark Coven, you only need to roll a 5 to get the spell off. Yeah, it's a very reliable signature spell to get off, and the damage is very good, although swinging, because you're going to be wounding most things on 6s. In fact, pretty much everything in the game on 6s. Vortex changes, already kind of talked about this, but you weren't using a lot of Vortex spells. The Vortex spells that you do have a pretty high casting value, so it's not a huge nerf to you, and it makes it easier to get rid of your opponent's annoying Vortex spells as well, because you can dispel not just from where the wizard is, but also where the Vortex is. Herdstone, this thing, absolutely incredible. In fact, let's just have a look at it and go through all of the things that it gives you, because it does give you a casting buff, but it's just worth remembering. Again, just a quick run through. It's a Herdstone, it's a bit of terrain that you put down. It gives magic resist 1 to the unit controlling it. It gives you reroll 1s to any allied Beastman unit within 12 inches of it if you control it. It gives you +1 to your casting roll and -1 to your enemy's casting roll. So theoretically, that's you know, effectively magic resist 2 on a unit, but it does stack with magic resist if you put it into, you know, you could take magic resist 3 on a character, put it into a unit, have that unit controlling the Herdstone, and, you know, have the wizard within range of the Herdstone as well. -4 to be cast at, which is absolutely huge. Enemy units get -1 to leadership tests for specifically fear, panic, or terror, and at the end of the game you get up to you get 200 points if you control it, and your opponent gets it as well. But you know, just so many rules on there. You're definitely going to be wanting to take it, and specifically because of the casting we're talking about, the Dark Sorcery rule here, getting +1 to the casting roll, is absolutely massive. It's gone from being a 25% increase on the casting roll for, you know, when everyone was running level 4 wizards. Now that people are running level 3s, or maybe even level 1s and 2s, it's like a 50% increase up to 100% increase. So huge boost there. Herdstones, already good. Definitely put them in your lists. Finally, in terms of just things to bring up here, Dark Covenant, again, talked about it. +1 to cast is very good. There's no cap on how many times you can use it in a turn. It's just really solid, and it's barely a risk to use. You're still only miscasting 1 in 36 times. If your opponent has some way of making you miscast more frequently, or if you're using power scrolls, maybe you consider not using the buff here, but just really solid. You're probably going to windmill slam that every time you're casting when you can use it. Specific laws. Now, there's access to 4 laws, 3 for most of them, and then also the primal magic. Dark magic. I like this one the least. I think if I'm taking dark magic, it's probably because I want to go for a unit of 3 or 4 Dragon Ogres, and I want them to do a specific job. And that specific job is trying to break a Death Star. So I'm taking it for Battle Lust, I'm taking it for Word of Pain, I'm going to try and make my opponent -1 toughness if necessary, and I'm going to be hitting the Dragon Ogres with Battle Lust, getting them up to a 4th attack each, getting them up to, you know, re-rolling those hits. They've only got, a moderate weapon skill, so being able to re-roll those hits, just get a lot more consistency in there. Very nice to have. I don't really see much use for it outside of that. There is a signature magic missile, so if you went with a Lore Familiar, you can still do some damage at range, but it really pales in comparison to Vile Tide. So, Dark Magic, my least favourite, mostly because you just don't have the fast units to leverage this, but I think it works quite well with Dragon Ogres if you wanted to go for some sort of Dragon Ogre Death Star. Demonology. This is probably the best pick I would go for outside of the normal sort of Hag Tree Fetish combo we'll get to later on, but Demonology is really nice for a melee-focused support caster. What do I mean by that? Well, you've got a great spell called Steed of Shadows, and that gives your infantry unit a 12-inch move, which means you get a 24-inch fly that you don't have to, fly march, sorry. You don't have to test a march because you fly, so you can just go wherever you want. It's impossible for your opponent to lock you down if you get the spell off. You can position yourself right in front of your opponent. You can aggressively get onto some scoring early in the game, depending on what it is. I think this is a really, really solid spell lore to be picking up. I really like it. It also gives you Demonic Vessel, Demonic Vigor. Demonic Vigor is fine. It's only, as a short-term buff. It gives you +1 toughness and movement, which is not bad. But Demonic Vessel giving you +1 strength, attacks, and AP is really nice. If I'm looking at running some sort of infantry Death Star, my concern becomes, if my opponent charges, I get 2 ranks worth of attacks. I feel really good about that. If I charge, they're going to get 2 ranks worth of attacks, and I don't, and that doesn't feel great. So, how do we get around that? Well, Demonology is really nice. Hit them with Demonic Vessel, give each model a second attack, increase the strength, increase the AP, and at that point, I'm not worried about the fact that I'm losing a second rank of attacks, because I'm doing more damage on the charge than I would be without charging anyway. So, Demonology looks really good if you want to play that sort of Death Star, but it doesn't have any durability boosts, which is a little bit of a problem, but I guess your models are super cheap, so maybe you can get away with it. Speaking of durability increases, I do like Elementalism. So this is Death Star support for a character that doesn't have to be inside the unit. This is your Hag Tree Fetish caster on Chariot. You know, the build that you've either played 100 times or you've seen at, events or lists online 100 times. You're taking, a Great Bray Shaman, level 4 probably, because you're going to be rolling your spells and you're trying to get the good spells. You're going to take Talisman of Protection, you're going to take potentially a Ruby Ring of Ruin, or that's maybe a little bit up in the air, and you're going to take the Hag Tree Fetish. This is going to let you fish for a second magic missile. You're going to reroll all the wounds that on the magic missiles that you cast. Remember, the bound spells don't count as you casting, so you don't get it there. And then you're relatively tanky, and you're on a chariot, and you've got 360 line of sight for your shooting. All great stuff. So this is still very good. This is maybe still the default caster, and it lets you support a Death Star without being in them. You can give a unit of Dragon Ogres, or Gore, or Primal Warherd, or, you know, Minotaurs, the 5-up ward save from rolling into Earthen Ramparts. Earthen Ramparts, obviously quite a difficult spell to cast now, but it's a spell that you can cast on a unit without having to be inside it. So really flexible lore for casters, and I think Elementalism, if you don't know where to go, start with Elementalism and work from there for Beastmen. The other lore that is obviously tied specifically to a detachment or a magic item is Primal Magic. Now this is fine, I do still like this lore and I think it has play, but I think you've got to play around with it more in a way, instead of just having obvious strength, you've got to build your list around it a little bit more. It gives you Fanatic Protection. That's really nice. So the signature spell is a template that also makes the area around it difficult terrain. And that's just a really solid way to make it difficult for Fanatics to play into. If your local meta is very heavy on Orcs and Goblins, you might find that people play lots of units of Night Goblins with Fanatics, because this is going to be one of the cheap, strong scoring units for Orcs and Goblins. You can just make it very difficult for them to actually put those Fanatics near you, rip through you with their massive amounts of damage. So I do like it for that, and you can always swap into it. You don't have to roll it. Leadership positioning play. Now, this is the where I was talking about it being a little bit more of a difficult lore to use, and it's not necessarily... It might not even be necessarily building around it in terms of list design. It might be how you play and your positioning. But there's leadership debuffs in there, and it's something that's, you know, there's good laws in there to make it difficult for your opponent to position against you. So if you're jockeying for position, if you're trying to play the my brick of infantry is going to beat your brick of infantry and then hopefully, you know, beat you, make you break, run you down, this is a good lore to go in, because you've got leadership debuffs and you've got the abilities to block them, make it difficult for people to see you, or make it harder for people to get to you with multiple sources of difficult or dangerous terrain. Fury of the Beast is worth mentioning as well. So this is, again, kind of like Demonology in terms of you can charge and still get extra attacks, because it's a self-buff enchantment spell, so you can cast it in combat, and until the end of this turn, the caster and any unit they've joined gains the Fight in Extra Ranks special rule. This means that you can charge and get, you know, 2 ranks of attacks. Or if you have been charged, or if you're in a long combat and it's your turn, you can just roll this spell, get a 3rd rank of attacks. It's quite nice to have. It's not as good as Demonology in terms of the buff, but if you like the rest of the package in this lore, this still does, you know, good things. And you've still got a mobility spell in this lore. You've got Call of the Wild, which gives you a target-friendly unit reserve move, which is not as good as marching 24 inches with fly, but it's still pretty decent in terms of you've probably got an open order unit, so you've got a lot of flexibility with your positioning. Very quickly, before we go into the actual list building, let's just refresh our memory on what the Armies of Infamy actually do. So first of all, we've got the Minotaur Bloodherd, and this is the one without any level 3 or 4 casters. You can take a Doom Ball, 0 to 1 per 1,000 points, a level 2 Bray Shaman, or level 1 to level 2, 0 to 1 per 1,000 points, and then also Gorballs, Wargors, and Centaur Chieftains. So you're pretty limited on what you can take, but this is the Minotaur detachment. Core, you've got to take at least a 1/3 of your army here, and you've got to take at least 1 Minotaur herd per 1,000 points. 0 to 1 herdstone, so being able to take that in core is really nice. And you can take regular Gore, Ungor, and Chaos Warhounds. Special, you can take up to 0 to 1 unit of Dragon Ogres per 1,000 points. Not really a cap, you're probably not taking more than 2 units of Dragon Ogres, I would imagine. A good selection of things, you know, you can take Gorgons here, and then also plenty of other bits and pieces. And finally, in rare, you've got the Shaggoth, you've got the Giant, you've got Ogres and Trolls from the Warriors of Chaos book as well. And you can take a BSB, which can be a Gorbal or Wargor. So, what do we get in terms of special rules? First of all, you get Impetuous, and this is less of a downside than it was previously. Impetuous obviously used to be, if you didn't want to charge, at the start of the combat phase, you'd roll a d6 for each unit with Impetuous. On a 1, 2, 3, they had to charge. On a 4, 5, 6, they don't. Now it's a leadership test, and keep in mind, you've got decent leadership in here, especially if you combine it with things like... Warband is the word I was looking for. So you can get efficiency, not that the Warband actually applies to Impetuous. So double brain fart there. Champions of Slaughter, you if your general becomes frenzied, the entire army within command range will become frenzied. This, again, would be nice, but frenzy is worse. So you've got to be getting quite aggressive with this to get the benefit of it. But it's still not a bad rule. You can also take mutations and or chaos gifts up to a total of 50 points on your Minotaur characters. This just means that you've got flexibility to take some of the best bits of the Warriors of Chaos book in terms of a strike last aura or -1 to be shot. Really nice stuff that you can layer on there. And finally, Magics of the Dark Gods. Your general must be a Doom Bull or Gore Bull, and you can make them a level 1 or level 2 wizard, and they know spells from dark magic or battle magic, and they may wear armor without penalty. Keep in mind that you can't take Vile Tide. You don't get the actual signature spells, the Lore of Beast signature spells that the Bray Shamans can pick up, unfortunately. Something to mention here as well is there is a change to mob rule, which is not something that I mentioned for the general army, but it's definitely worth talking about if we're going into talking about Minotaurs. They've changed it so that it no longer affects if you've got magic armor that increase your armor save. So what am I talking about? Mob rule or Motley Crew, whichever way around it's worded, you would take the majority armor save of the unit when you're being shot at, or the majority armor save of the fighting rank in combat. So you could make it so that you had a unit of 3 Minotaurs, one with just a shield or light armor, one with shield and light armor, so you've got one with a 6-up save, one with a 5-up save, and then you tool up your unit champion to the 9s to make them as tanky as possible. And you'd give them full plate, you'd give them shield, and you'd give them a magical gift to get them up to that 2-up armor save, which meant that the entire unit had a 2-up armor save against all attacks taken, which was really solid. I don't think it was overpowered. I also don't necessarily think it should have existed, so them pruning this is probably fine. But it does mean that the sort of small unit of Minotaurs you were able to give a really good armor save to is gone. And that's something that you've got to consider when you're building the list, because it makes it so taking one big unit and one small unit is maybe less good than it previously was. Into the Wild Herd, we've got the fairly standard unit composition list here, but you can't take Minotaurs. So you can take Beast Lords or Great Bray Shamans 0 to 1 per 1,000 points, and then Wargors, Bray Shamans, and Centaur Chieftains just uncapped as well. Into your core, again, you've got to take at least 33%, which was previously a downside, but now with the new match play restrictions, much less of an issue. I'm very happy to do so. You can take a couple of Tuskor Chariots, you can take Centaur Herds if you take in core, if you take Centaur Chieftain, but I'm probably not going to do that anyway. We've got Gore, Ungor, Warhounds, Primal Warhounds, and Razor Gore in core as well. So we're probably looking at bigger bricks of Razor Gore supported by stuff like bigger bricks of Gore supported by units of Razor Gore or Warhounds alongside the Primal Warhead we have to take. Special, you can take 0 to 1 unit of Dragon Ogres, and then you've got all of the other stuff here, the special units in the book. A couple of different monsters here that you can take in special as well, and then into rare we've got the Shaggoths, Jabberslice, Cygors, Giants, Giant Spawn, which all of this I'm not super worried about taking. The Chaos Spawn, I actually think I'm probably pretty interested in taking, but we'll go through there. And your BSB can be a Wargore. Rules, we've talked about Dark Coven to death. Reminder, it's just, you can, if you've got other wizards in your command range, allied Beast, Bray Shaman wizards, then you can use them and get +1 to your casting roll. If you miscast on a double 1, you then, everyone in your aura has to roll that miscast roll. Very good, very strong, you're going to use it most of the time. You can know spells from the Lore of Primal Magic, which is solid but not necessarily a go-to. We've got Gifts from the Dark God. You can spend an additional 25 points on magic items and additional 25 points on mutations. This is really nice if you want to put Ogre Blade onto a character. And finally, you can give Ambush to a lot of things. Ambush on core is something that I was not previously thinking about, but in this version of the game, where bringing on scoring units behind your opponent's lines to threaten their baggage train or their home objectives, I really like. You can do it for, give it to characters for 10 points a model, you can give it to units for 1 point a model, and 0 to 1 unit of unit strength 10 or less may be given ambushes for free. Now, unit strength 10 does make that a lot less appealing, but I'm probably happy to take just a cheap unit of Ungor with free ambushes coming in trying to mess up my opponent's baggage train. You don't have to be unit strength 5 to actually hold that one, so, or to destroy it, I should say. Alright, let's go through some list building. We'll start off with Minotaur Bloodherd, which I think is the weakest of the 3 ways that you can play Beastmen at the moment, but of course it doesn't matter if that's your favourite way to do it, feel free to go ahead. And I think you can still play, quite a reasonable list where you've got plenty of quite beefy scoring units. So it's not the end of the world, I think just the other 2 ways of building are a little bit better. But for Bloodherd, we have to take at least 2 units of Minotaurs, so let's just start off with a couple of units of 4 with full command. And we'll just give them 2 great weapons, 2 shields, and go from there. We can give them ambush as well. We'll hold off on that one, but let's go 2 units like so. What else do we want to put in here? I think I'm pretty happy to go for a big brick of Gore. Something like 30 of them. It's not even that big a brick realistically, but let's take 30 of them with a great weapon and let's give this unit a war banner, because this is going to be a more aggressive unit in terms of taking and holding objectives. So we're going to put this unit here with hand weapons shield, so we've got a 5-up armor save. The additional hand weapons, now that you can potentially fight in a second rank, are a lot less appealing in my opinion. So, but also we're just going to beef up the front rank with some good characters, which is nice to have. Perfect. So we've got some decent core there. We're above our minimum core, and what do we want to put in terms of other units? Is there anything that we're super keen to put in? Shaggoths are interesting. We'll come back to that. Let's have a look at characters. So, Doomball. I think having some level of dispel threat is quite important. So falling back on the sort of build that I was looking at previously, where you're not taking this character as an offensive piece, you're taking it as a defensive piece. We're going to go for the Demon Heart, which is an arcane item that counts you as being 1 level higher than that of the wizard whose spell you are dispelling, or in the case of bound spells, 1 level higher than that of the bound spell. So basically you're looking to be above them in terms of their dispel threat. You're also going to give this character, it's not the BSB, it's the general. So let's give them a full plate chaos armor. This is full plate, which gives you a 4-up armor save and then combines with a 5-up ward save. Is there anything else we super want to stack on top of this model? We can go something like, I do like the Scimitar of Skultar. Strength user, AP -1, armor bane 1, multiple wounds. So it's a very poor man's Ogre Blade. But you can combine it with, let's say, a shield here. And we'll give it the, let's have a look here. The Gouge Tusk rule, which gives you an additional AP 1 on all of your attacks. So, given that you start off with 5 attacks at Strength 6, your weapon is going to be Strength 6, AP 2, Armor Bane 1, flat damage 2. So it really is a poor man's Ogre Blade, and we've also managed to go for quite a defensive piece here. Good dispel threat, all of that stuff there, so no need to buy anything else. Then we probably want a BSB. I do like a BSB, and we could go a Warhoof, but given that we're in the Minotaur detachment, you probably want to be playing Minotaurs, just thematically. So what are we thinking in terms of that? Well, if we're taking it as a support for the Gore Herd, maybe we make this this unit bigger. Let's go 40, and let's put in a Herdstone as well, because we really do want that Herdstone. So we're going to go for a Battle Standard Bearer. What do we want to give this character? There is, if I remember correctly, quite a nice piece of magic armor. Yes, there we go. So, Pelt of the Dark Young, which gives you increase your armor value by 1, and it gives you magic resist 2. Magic resist, obviously really nice for your Death Stars. Anything that you don't want casting spells on there gives us, so it gives us basically, you can put it in the same unit, like, you know, put it in with the Gore and have 2 units that are quite well protected against magic, or you can split them up and have a little bit more variety across the board. We'll go heavy armor shield, and we'll also go with, let's give this character Gnarled Hide to give it an additional +1 to the armor save. So that takes us from a previously we would have had a 4-up, then we've got the Gnarled Hide for a 3-up and a Pelt of the Dark Young to get a 2-up armor save, which is not too shabby there. And we can stack that with the Enchanting Aura, which gives every unit in combat, they lose strikes first, and if they don't have strikes first, they get strikes last. So it's the double whammy, they're going to be striking after us, which is really nice to have. Perfect. So that's our characters sorted. Maybe we put another character in. Is there anything else that we really want to get into this list? I'm thinking potentially this list would benefit from just more beefy pressure. So maybe a couple of units of 2, let's see here. Dragon Ogres, heavy armor, great weapon, just 2 units of 3 so we can keep the pressure on. And then maybe we just beef up these units of scoring Minotaurs as well. That might be the way to go. So you could go something like a unit of 6, a unit of 4. The unit 6 needs another couple of weapons in there. And are there any standard bearers any standards that we really want to put on anything? I don't think there's anything that's I'm super in love with. This is a funny banner to go for. In fact, maybe we go for the unit of 4 and we give them the Soiled Tapestry. So it gives you hatred all enemies, however all enemies hate you. This just gives this unit a bit of punch, so if you get in there, you're going to be doing a lot more damage than you previously would have been. And yeah, I don't think this is the sort of direction that I'd be looking to go in for the Blood Herd. So we've got a wizard character here that also has some decent punch while being tanky. We've got a BSB that's providing, you know, lots of buffs. It's a strike last aura, so if anyone charges you, you hit them first. You've also got the magic resist as well, really nice to have in there as well. Super tanky, 40 gore here for, you know, characters to join. Herdstone because it's really good. A unit of 6, unit of 4 Minotaurs. The unit of 4 Minotaurs has gone for the hatred everything because it gives them some extra punch. And then 2 units of Dragon Ogres just to play the full pressure, you know, full send towards your opponent, walk forwards, take them off objectives, and I think that should work pretty well. Moving on to the Wild Herd. Now this is the one that I think has the most exciting options to it. And we're going to start off with, let's just say, I don't know, 5 wizards. Do you need to run 5 wizards? No. Do you want to run 5 wizards? Maybe not. I think it's a valid way to play, though, and you can do a lot of damage at range. So we're going to be putting in a Herdstone. Obviously, we've talked about the Herdstone. We've talked about the Dark Cabal. Making sure that you're... Oh, sorry, Dark Sorcery. We're getting loads of buffs to our casting in this, this detachment. How are we setting everything up? Well, I think the level 1 wizards are probably just going to roll into... I think if I'm looking for sort of like a backup lore, they're almost all going to take Vile Tide, and this is going to be range, you know, a lot of magic output looking to cast Vile Tide. I think Primal Magic is a good backup because against, you know, for specifically Fanatics, or if you need to try and deal with someone who is going to full send towards you and you want something to help with that, the Primordial Gloom signature spell is not awful to do so. And there's no point going to Demonology or Dark Magic where they've got a different signature spell. Elementalism has a bad signature spell, so we're probably just going to go Primal Magic here. I wouldn't be upset at giving them all a Power Scroll as well. That's probably fine. There are some other good items that you can give them here as well. So we don't need that one. The Jagged Dagger you can sacrifice to get plus wounds as your casting roll. I don't think is necessary here because they've already got so many options for it. We don't need the Demon Heart. One of our level 4s is going to take their Hag Tree Fetish. Blood of the Shadow Gave. Just Auto Dispel and then Plague Chalice. Is this the one I'm thinking of? Yes, so you can put this on and get some perfect invocations, so you're more likely to cast your spells. I do like this, but I don't think that it's necessarily super worthwhile taking. So, yeah, probably just looking at Power Scrolls, level 1 Primal Magic, all swapping into Vile Tide. So the easiest way for me to do that is just to swap over here, and... yeah, pretty happy with that. Then we're going to go with, the, you know, you love it, the level 4 Wizard, Elementalism. Ooh, let's go back to that... yeah, there we go. And we're going to go Talisman of Protection, Ruby Ring of Ruin, probably a single Power Scroll, and the Hag Tree Fetish. And you wouldn't be able to put the Power Scroll in if we weren't in this lore, but it gets you a few extra points. Make sure we're getting the spell off. If you're, for example, casting against a dragon with magic resist, you really want to be making sure that you're getting that very key Vile Tide off on the turn that it matters. I'm not really bothered about putting any enchantments on here for the mutations, so that's fine. And yeah, I think that is solid here. Then we've got a level 3, and I think if we're going for a level 3 caster, I wouldn't say no to... I was going to say Lore Familiar, but I do actually want to roll into spells. So let's just not do that. Let's put Kralmor in. And that gives us our, you know, 2 level 4 wizards, so we can roll into the spells as needed. I think this is probably the way to go. Yes, I'm happy with that. We've only got 120 points remaining, so we're just going to make Kralmor the general here, I think. If I could click the unit. Kralmor doesn't want to be clicked. Okay. Kralmor's the general, or let's make one of the Brave Shamers the general. Doesn't make too much difference. Into core, we do need to have some units to bunker these wizards into. So let's start off with the Primal War Herd that we have to take. So we've got at least 10 gore and at least 10 ungore. Let's bump that up to 30. 30 feels like a pretty decent sized unit if you want to just have it on the board in terms of being relatively beefy. So let's go with the full command here. We can give them the War Banner. Just make them not appealing to be charged. And we can bunker some of the wizards in there quite comfortably. What else do we want to put in? Well, I think if we're going this way, Ungor with Ambush is quite nice because you can disrupt your opponent's game plan. So let's go for a unit of 10 with the free ambush upgrade, and then maybe we go something like units of 20 to look to take objectives, and we can just keep going. Yeah, give maybe 2 units like so. So we've got some ambush units, so we're keeping our drops low. You don't have to deploy most of this on the table, but you can just put them on objectives very cheaply, get some objective points, and come in and mess your opponent up. Also, good places to bunker wizards if you need to. And we do need something else in the core units. So let's just go a couple of Razor Gore. Even though they don't score anything because they're too low unit strength, they are still very good. They do still have some reasonable punch. And I do like a couple of Razor Gore in here. So something like this for our core is not too shabby. And then we've got, how many points left? 350 points. Now this is an army that probably would benefit from some more punch, because this is about doing as much range damage as possible. So let's have a look what we want to go with. 1 unit of Dragon Ogres is not a bad idea. Obviously you can only take 1 unit in this detachment, which does leave us with about 150 points. Or actually, a couple of Giant Spawn of Nurgle I think are quite... Oops. Not regular spawn. Giant Spawn of Nurgle. Can we not take Giant Spawn of Nurgle in this one? Have I misread? Oh no, of course you can't, because it's in a different Arcane Journal. Apologies. We're not going to put Giant Spawn in, but they would have been nice. So we've still got about 150 points, and we do need to fill up those last points as well. What are we looking for in terms of punch here? I guess we could go more Razor Gore. Could go more characters. I'm not loving those options. We might have to shave some points somewhere. That might be the option. Okay, well, how about a couple of Tuskor Chariots? Because they're pretty cheap and they hit pretty hard. Again, they're too low unit strength to score. Only unit strength 5, but I think they do a pretty solid job of actually getting some punch in. Again, with the Razor Gore, give you more backup instead of just having... I can take Musician off there as well. Yeah, something along those lines. So this is more proof of concept, and probably want to play around more with the core, maybe go heavier on scoring units. But we've got 2 level 4 wizards, one of which is the standard Hagtree Fetish character on a chariot. Kralmore, 3 level 1 wizards, all with power scrolls, all going to take Vile Tide, do as much damage at range as possible. A Primal Warherd, because you have to take it. Some Ambushing Ungor to keep your drops low if you want to go for that. A couple of units of Razor Gore, a couple of units of Tuskor, and then some Dragon Ogres and the ever-present Herdstone. And I think that works pretty well in terms of getting the ranged output build going while still having some counterpunch. Last but not least, we've got the Grand Army Detachment. And this is your sort of more standard Beastmen. What are we looking to put into a list if we don't want to skew down one of the 2 directions we can go? So if we're doing that, I think we're really going to be looking to start off with, you know, something like a 30 unit of Gore. Again, full command, battle standard bearer just to get a bit more combat res, great weapon. I like shields. Hand weapons are still fine, but I think shields now pip them out given the changes. And then we still really like a couple of Razor Gore. Do we want more Razor Gore? I think we could probably go up to the 4 Razor Gore that we're allowed. This sort of army doesn't really care about going first all that much. It really likes having lots of cheap early drops, and these Razor Gore, despite not scoring, because they're only unit strength 1 being War Beasts, they do hit really hard for the points, and you can combo them up and use them as pseudo units. And keep in mind, they have Swift Stride, so they're one of the few things that are fast in this army. On top of that, if we're going for sort of pressure to deal with infantry units off objectives, a couple of Tuskor Chariots isn't too bad, but we've gone quite over on core, so maybe we'll come back to that one. In terms of what we're choosing to put into our character slot, I think we're probably looking at our default caster here, Elementalism. We're looking at a Lore Familiar Power Scroll and Talisman of Protection. That would be my sort of default now, and how many points that puts at. Okay, maybe we go for a second Power Scroll, because again, I'm more worried about getting the Hagtree Fetish Vile Tide off than I am using Ruby Ring of Ruin. I can put that on another character if I want to. Then I really do like a tanky Doomball who's there to absolutely ruin people's day. This needs to be able to go toe-to-toe with a dragon and not necessarily win, but not take too much damage, threaten to do some wounds, and also have the static combat res of the Gore Brick to back it up. So how are we building this? Well, There's a couple of options. I really used to like the Ogre Blade, but now it's 75 points, you can't give it a ward save as well. But one of the options we could go for is Ogre Blade combined with Blackened Plate, which gives you a 4-up armor save for the full plate. You then also go in the mutations for Gnarled Hide. This gets you +1 armor save up to a 3-up, and give it a shield as well, and that gets you to a 2-up armor save. So no ward save there, but you can theoretically cast Earthen Ramparts onto the unit that's going to get charged, which is not awful. So this is maybe the way that we'd go, and it is the sort of hardest hitting Doom Bull, because you start off with 5 attacks. Obviously Frenzy is not as good, but with Blood Rage, you do get up, not Blood Rage, sorry, Blood Greed, you do get +2 attacks if you become frenzied, so you get up to 7 attacks with the Ogre Blade on the charge, if that goes off. So this is pretty beefy, and let's leave it like this for now, given that we do have a way to put a ward save on the unit, at which point it doesn't matter that it doesn't have one. I think I also want, if I'm playing around with a combat res brick, I definitely want to have a BSB, partially for the reliability of the rerolls, but also just having more defenses there is really nice. And this character really doesn't want to die, so maybe we just go something nice and simple, like let's go the full plate Chaos Armor and a shield, getting us up to a 3-up armor save. In fact, no, we don't need to do that. We can save some points. We're going to go heavy Chaos Armor, because that gives us a 5-up armor save, combined with a shield, gives us a 4-up armor save, but with the parry save, because we are regular or heavy infantry, that does give us a 3-up save in combat. So just saves us 10 points there. Is there anything else we want to stack on top of this? Slug Skin is an absolute classic to put on the sort of Death Star unit that people were running even before the changes. The reason for that is it gives enemy models that attack this model or its unit -1 to hit. So you've got the Doom Bull, who is -1 to hit, also a 2-up armor save, also potentially a 5-up ward save from the Great Bray Shaman here. So this is really something that dragons don't want to tangle with, because it can have up to 7 attacks at strength 7, AP -2, armor bane 1, D3 damage, and that's before you roll on the Gaze of the Gods table. So this is pretty solid here, I think. What do we want to fill the rest of the points up with? And there's lots of options, but I think I'm really big on the Gigantic Spawn of Chaos coming back. They were previously a little bit worse in terms of they were not resistant to poison shooting, but they are just such a pain in the backside to deal with. They are so beefy. They are, for 170 points, you get T6, 6 wounds with a 5-up armor save, because they've got the heavy armor. They also get, from the Mark of Nurgle, a 5-up regen and poison attacks. Their output is aggressively fine. They do have stomp attacks, which makes up for their kind of lower output in combat, but on top of that, their random move is 3d6, so it's really hard for your opponent to play against. This sort of list that we've got here really struggles against evasion armies. Something like a Gigantic Spawn of Chaos, which is a random mover, doesn't care about evasion, because you can stand out of my charge arc. I'm going to end my move in combat with you, because that's how random movers work, baby. Hell yeah, we're going to charge you. With that aside, we've got some good pressure here from the Gigantic Spawn, and honestly, I think a great place to end this would be 3 Dragon Ogres. Again, I know they've gone up in points, but if you're just playing this sort of pressure style, where you're looking to put pressure on, you're looking to score with these gore, I think that's really solid. 25 points over. Let's drop some of the Razor Gore and the Tusk Gore, actually thinking about it, because I'd like at least 1 scoring unit for my backlines, which this unit wants to move forwards aggressively. I probably want something that can score my home objective. So let's just say 30 Ungor with full command, and we'll pay to give them ambushes as well, so they don't have to count as a drop and they can start off the board if needs be. And there we go. This would be something along the lines of how I would build a regular grand army for Beastmen. Plenty of ways you can take them. I think Beastmen are one of the better books in terms of having a lot of options. The power level, yes, the monsters are generally not great, but the power level is more flat in that book than it is in some of the other books, where things like dragons are very good, and things like, I don't know, special infantry are not very good. So some nice choices in here. You can, even if you want to, look at Bestigor. I will say I'm not super in love in Bestigor because they don't have hand weapon shield. If they had hand weapon shield and great weapons, I think I'd be very willing to give them a go, but they don't get all of the benefits of the infantry buffs, and as such, I'm not super in love with them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff. But it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Ground Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Ground Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.